Why does the key currency sound so mysterious? Hello, I'm Seng-Kyung Yoo from the Institute for Political and Economic Alternatives in Korea. Today I'd like to talk about the key currency, or reserve currency. It's usually described as a strong currency accepted around the world, backed by economic and military power. That sounds convincing, but it doesn't actually answer the crucial questions. Why is the US dollar at the center? Where are countries' foreign reserves actually kept? And does the United States simply profit from this position with no cost? The core point I want to make is this: a key currency is not magic. It's an institutional design. It's about which country's central bank network serves as the final settlement layer for the world's payments. Right now, that final layer is anchored in the dollar. 1. Start with domestic settlement. To understand global payments, we start with something familiar. When a customer at one bank transfers money to someone at another bank, we see transfer completed on the phone and think it's done. But the real settlement happens afterward between the banks. All banks in a country hold a reserve account at that country's central bank. When Bank A's customer pays Bank B's customer, the central bank's settlement system lowers Bank A's reserves and raises Bank B's reserves. So, in reality, the payment is complete when numbers move on the central bank's ledger. The same logic applies in the United States. U.S. banks hold accounts at the Federal Reserve, and their obligations are settled through a system called Fedwire. In other words, settlement is the movement of reserves inside the central bank's books. 2. The global stage, the ledger of the New York Fed. Now scale that up to the global economy. When a company in one country sells goods to a company in another country, where is that payment actually finalized? Today, most cross-border settlement is ultimately routed through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Most central banks around the world hold their own dollar accounts there. International trade payments are settled by shifting dollar balances from one central bank's account at the New York Fed to another. So cross-border settlement is really an accounting operation between dollar accounts. The movement is a line item change inside the New York Fed's ledger. 3. Example: a Brazilian importer pays a Korean exporter. Let's make this concrete. Suppose a Brazilian importing company buys goods from a Korean exporter. On the surface, you could describe it as: Brazil pays in reals, Korea receives in won. But in practice, the payment clears through dollars. Why? Because both the Central Bank of Brazil and the Bank of Korea hold dollar reserve accounts at the New York Fed. Here's what actually happens. 1. The Brazilian importer tells its Brazilian commercial bank to pay. 2. That bank's reserves at the Central Bank of Brazil go down. 3. The Central Bank of Brazil then debits its own dollar account at the New York Fed. 4. The New York Fed credits the same dollar amount to the Bank of Korea's dollar account. In plain terms, a number moved from one cell in the New York Fed's ledger to another. 5. The Bank of Korea then increases a domestic bank's won reserves at home, and that domestic bank deposits won into the Korean exporter's account. So the won the Korean exporter receives is created as the result of a dollar movement in New York. Formally, you might call it real for won, but in substance, it is a dollar settlement that must pass through the New York Fed. 4. SWIFT, CIPS, Fedwire, the three layers of dollar settlement. Three names dominate global payment plumbing: SWIFT, CIPS, and Fedwire. SWIFT is not a payment rail. It's a secure messaging network that tells banks, send this amount from A to B. It's basically the postal service for payment instructions. Money itself does not move on SWIFT. CIPS is a private clearing system in New York. It nets huge dollar obligations between banks so only the final balances remain. Think of it as you owe me this much. I owe you that much. Let's settle just the difference. Fedwire is run by the Federal Reserve. It's a real-time gross settlement system. This is where actual dollar reserves move between accounts, and the payment becomes final in law and in fact. 5. CIPS, China's yuan network and the dollar's network effect. Is there an alternative to this dollar-centric structure? China is actively trying to build one. China created CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system, to allow international banks to settle directly in Chinese yuan, under the supervision of the People's Bank of China. In function, you can think of CIPS as the yuan version of CIPS, a cross-border yuan clearing and settlement network. But here is the crucial difference: scale. CIPS processes on the order of about $1.8 trillion worth of payments per day. CIPS processes on the order of tens of billions, roughly $50 to $60 billion per day. That's a gap of more than 30 to 1. That gap is not just about volume. It's about trust and network effects. The world's banks and corporations are already deeply plugged into the dollar system. The dollar network is liquid, fast, contractually enforceable, and cheap to use. Because everyone uses dollars, it's convenient to use dollars, therefore everyone uses dollars. Because it's convenient to use dollars, everyone keeps using dollars. That self-reinforcing loop is the dollar network effect. It means that even if an alternative exists, like CIPS, it's incredibly hard to dislodge the dollar. Because the entire world is already wired into it. It's not only that the USA blocks alternatives, it's that the network itself keeps reproducing its own dominance. 6. Bretton Woods, dollar privilege and the Triffin dilemma. How did the dollar get this role in the first place? After the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement, the US dollar was made convertible into gold, and central banks around the world opened accounts at the New York Fed. The balances in those accounts became the working reserves of the global system. In 1971, the United States ended dollar-gold convertibility. But the system didn't collapse. Gold disappeared, but the account network at the New York Fed remained. In effect, the ledger replaced the gold. The standard stopped being metal, and became access to the dollar clearing network. From this came what is often called the exorbitant privilege. The United States issues the currency that everyone else uses for settlement and for reserves. That part is true, but there is another side that is often ignored. The system also imposes a structural burden on the United States. The world needs dollars to trade, to borrow, to hold as reserves. For the world to get those dollars, the United States has to send dollars out. How does it send dollars out? By running persistent external deficits, buying more from the world than it sells, and paying the rest of the world in dollars. Over time, that means chronic current account deficits, pressure on U.S. manufacturing and industrial debt, and a buildup of financial claims on the U.S. held by the rest of the world. This tension is known as the Triffin dilemma. The more the world demands dollars, the more the U.S. must supply them. But the more the U.S. supplies them, the more it risks weakening parts of its own domestic economy. In other words, being the issuer of the key currency is not just a privilege. It is also an obligation that can hollow you out from the inside. So when people say, the US just benefits, that's only half the story. The dollar system gives leverage, and it creates internal strain. That contradiction is built into the architecture. 7. What foreign reserves really are. Now let's talk about foreign reserves, because this is badly misunderstood. When a central bank announces, "We have hundreds of billions in reserves," that does not mean it has vaults full of foreign cash. In practice, reserves are mainly two things. 1. Dollar deposits that the central bank itself holds at the New York Fed, and 2. U.S. Treasuries and other dollar-denominated assets. In other words, a country's reserves mostly live inside the U.S. financial system. That means a country's own financial stability is structurally tied to the dollar settlement framework. 8. The real face of dollar hegemony. This architecture is not just about efficiency. It is also about power. Because final settlement runs through dollar accounts in New York, the United States can freeze those accounts, or cut a country's banks off from dollar clearing altogether. The sanctions on Russia made that visible to everyone. So dollar hegemony is not just America is strong. It's the ability to control access to the world's final settlement ledger. It's power exercised through accounting infrastructure. 9. Conclusion: demystifying the key currency. Let's bring it together. 1. Cross-border payment is not suitcases of money. It is a movement of numbers between dollar accounts at the New York Fed. 2. Domestic and international settlement run on the same principle. Central bank reserves move, and that movement is what makes payment final. 3. Foreign reserves are not piles of cash at home. They are dollar balances at the New York Fed and U.S. Treasury assets inside the U.S. system. 4. China's CIPS is building a yuan alternative. But the dollar still dominates because of a powerful network effect. Everyone already uses it, so everyone keeps using it. 5. The dollar's role gives the United States leverage, but also forces the United States to supply dollars to the world, often by running long-term deficits and absorbing domestic strain. That built-in contradiction is the Triffin dilemma. So the reserve currency is not a mystical badge of greatness. It is a settlement infrastructure, a global network effect, and a structural burden on the country that issues it. Thank you for watching.